They didn't promote it on television because this was another one of George Scott's things. Well, if we give these main event matches away for free on TV and promote it, it'll kill the house shows because we got Flair and Steamboat working in all the house shows. So we don't want to tell them they can see it for free because they got to pay. He's still back in 1979. We'd been doing Clash of Champions and live events.
TV. I understand saying don't give it to them on TV, but it's going to be on.
Do you have Alzheimer's?
No.
Well, George did. That's why he was saying these things that I'm repeating to you. When George Scott took over Goofball as Booker, then George Scott's thing was he would have kept them and had us lose and get rid of us. Because he obviously, when we first met him, he had never seen us before. He didn't have one bit of clue who the fuck we were and didn't know why obviously we were getting paid that money. And he's yet to this day spoken a word to Bobby Eaton. Bobby opened the door one time and there he was coming and Bobby held the door open for him. He walked by like Bobby didn't exist. And our first meeting with him, I asked, well, George, what are your plans? This was his quote, "I just don't know what I'm going to do with you boys." What the fuck? We're one of the biggest drawing fucking tag teams that the company has had for the previous 5 years. He don't know what the fuck to do with us. Hiro Matsuda, who was a great wrestler, who actually was part owner of the Florida office at one point in time, who was a well-respected trainer. And, one of the icons of Japanese wrestling that had come over here and made good. But suddenly the one thing he was not was a great promo. And suddenly, it was the idea, I guess George Scott was, once again, he was 10 years behind the times. It looked like not only had he seen wrestling at all for the past several years, probably not watched the NWA even while he was working for Vince because he didn't know who most of us were. But he started bringing back people that he had worked with, not even just in the 70s, but in the 60s, and it was 1989. Now we started to realize this shit is not going to be good because not only is Vince telling people it's fucking fake, but our own fucking new owners are doing this mega media blitz where they're talking about how that everything is fake and scripted and we're going to have these characters and we're going to change this shit, and everybody just started shaking their heads like, oh, fuck. Jimmy Crockett became the booker until they could get another one. Mm-hmm. And the first thing Jimmy Crockett did was come to us and say, I'm not a booker, which he wasn't. He had never booked. But we figured he's been around, he knows enough about wrestling, and he said this, I know enough to do maintenance until we can get somebody. So don't worry, you guys, you're figured in, because it was Jimmy Crockett and us. We'd drawn him millions of dollars. But he didn't like Randy Rhoads. I said, Joe, what the fuck are they doing? Greensboro on a Wednesday night, and he said to me, well, we've got to save the weekends for the big towns. I said, what bigger town is there than Greensboro? He said, well, like Chicago and Philadelphia. So I carried all my books in my bag at the time. I went and got my previous year's book out and flipped through and showed him $130,000 house, $100,000 house, $85,000 house, Starcade, what, blah, blah, blah. He said, I had no idea. You had no idea? Why didn't you ask somebody? That's when it got all fucked up, when WCW was Turner Broadcasting and everything and the formats were changed. They're changing the scripts. Where did I put my contracts? Yeah, that's the one, April 1988. We were making $225,000 a year apiece. Now, Jimmy continued paying us payoffs on the shows, but we were to get a balloon payment at the end of the contract if we hadn't made our 225s. That gave him some room. Well, when Turner Broadcasting, and the reason why we were making more than Tully and Arn is because they had started renegotiating, but then he found out that the shit was going south and he stopped those negotiations, but we already got this piece of paper signed. The WWF has all the kids. Why don't we have kids? Well, we'll get these kids and we'll call them the Ding Dongs. And they'll have bells all over their costume and they'll have a ship's bell in the corner, and when the heels are getting the heat on one, the guy will ring the ship's bell and all the kids will start getting behind it and it'll be wonderful, and they'll be from Belleville, Illinois, right?
Yes, indeed.
Because that's not far from St. Louis, so he knew about that. That's where Herd started really making his name as the master of ridiculous, stupid fucking gimmicks. You know the Hunchbacks, right?
You can't get pinned, right?
Exactly. That never got to because I was in that meeting.
But I thought that might be lore. Is that legit?
No. I was in the Hunchback meeting. He gave this long dissertation about how we're going to have a team, we're going to call them the Hunchbacks. They got the big hump on their back. And Ole was on the committee at this point, right? And they got the hump on their back so you can't fucking pin them, right? You turn them this way, you turn them that way, you can't, they'll be unbeatable. Ole, not one to be topped, let Herd go through this whole fucking dissertation, right, about how the Hunchbacks, unbeatable tag team, going to be the greatest thing. And he said, finally Herd's finished, he said, okay, Jim, we'll book the Hunchbacks. Book me against them. As soon as I get in, I'll slap a submission hold on one of them, make them give up. You just beat the unbeatable team. That was the lowest clash ever, and everything had been flat through the summer. Ric Flair said, give me the goddamn book. And they gave it to him, and Herd promised him full control. That's when Flair called me and told me that he had taken over as booker, and he wanted me on the committee as soon as he could work a few things out, and as soon as he could get rid of one particular person, which was Eddie Gilbert. Rick is booker, and Kevin, they took Saturday night from a 1.9 to a 4. They took Sunday night from a 1.1 in June to a fucking 4.4. The Clash in June was a 3.8, and it was at record or second best ever levels 6 months later.
Right.
And the houses were starting to come back, and Herd still was not happy with Flair and trying to change everything.
What is he saying? You're saying he's not happy.
But just
you want
because
to have specific requests.
He would always argue with everything. He would change people's deals, or he would argue with everything, or we just need to have a good wrestling bout. This was for Center Stage on November 1st, 1989. That's the complete list of live events in order, the show that they're for. Then this is the pre-taped interviews that we need to shoot, the show that they're for, the approximate time. Then this is the actual shooting format for the program with announcer notes on the side. We fill in the job guys when we get there and see who Jody Hamilton had for us. There was a main event. Louis Spicoli brought him in because I always wanted to use him as Bobby Eaton's younger brother because he looked like it. So I would keep this because then he'd have me change it back. And then that's how Herd started pitting Jim Ross and Ric Flair against each other. Because it would be, who changed this shit? Well, Herd would instruct Jim Ross to make the change, so it would get back to Ric Flair, well, JR changed it. If I had Don Glass's number, I would call him tonight at fucking 3:30 in the morning. And when he answered the phone, I would say, Don, are you asleep in bed with your wife? And he'd say, no. And I'd say, neither are we, you stupid motherfucker, because you booked us in San Antonio on Easter in a fucking 15,000 seat building.